Hello, second graders. I am so excited to be here with you today to get ready to weave. Now, if you are not a second grader, you did not come home with these items in your packet. You would have had these and some yarn to go with it. If you are just joining us and you have never been weaving before, then I'm going to show you all the supplies that you need to get started to weave. So the very first thing that I want all of you to gather would be your piece of cardboard and your yarn, which we're going to call our waft. Grab your yarn and grab your piece of cardboard. But I'd also like you to get a ruler, a pair of scissors, and a pen. You do not have to have a permanent marker for this. You can use a Sharpie, you can use a pencil, you can use a Crayola marker. I just want you to have something to mark your loom with. This is called our loom. For my friends who did not come home with this in your second grade packet, you're going to need to find yourself a piece of cardboard. And my cardboard right here is about 6 inches by 6 inches. It doesn't matter what size your cardboard is. You don't want it to be too big because it will take a long time to weave, especially if this is your first time. So a piece of cardboard that's between 5 and 7 inches is probably the best. You want to try to find a thicker cardboard. All right, a cereal box would work, but it might bend. This is a thicker cardboard. This is from something like an Amazon box. So that I might go ahead and use and just cut that. If you need help cutting your square out, please ask a grown-up to help you. And then when you have it all ready to go, you'll have these items in front of you. Okay, remember you can pause the video at any time if you're confused and you need to rewind to watch what I'm doing. Weaving can be a little bit confusing, and sometimes if we've never done it before, it's really important to listen. It changes the way our weaving comes out if we do it the right way or if we do it the wrong way. What happens is if we don't do it correctly, when we try to take our weaving off of our loom, it falls apart. So what I want all my friends to do is to get their ruler out, and you're going to turn. We're going to end up doing this to our loom. We're going to mark it. So we're going to turn our cardboard, and I'm going to line up my ruler. I'm going to put the first little line on here, and I want to measure equal distances. It does not matter what those distances are. The 1 means it's 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch. That means I would have 5 lines on my paper. I'm going to do half inches. So I'm going to do 1, 2, where's my half inch? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'll have 11 marks on this one. This one I did half inch, and I only ended up with 3, 6. I had 9 on this one. So this you can see it's a little bit wider. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it to the other side, and I started on this end, so I'm going to start on this end with this one too. So I'm going to lay it here. I'm going to lay it down here. You can't see that. Silly me. Let me move that. Because mine is not even on both sides, see how this is closer to the edge and this is farther? I just want to line it up down here at the bottom so that my lines will match up. This is the most important part. I want my lines to match up. That's why I'm measuring. So I'm just going to go with all my half-inch lines. I'm just making a mark. Now, I said you can use a pencil. I'm doing this so you can see my marks. Okay? So if I were to hold my ruler up, look at those marks. They're right straight across from each other. And that's all I want. I just want them to be straight across from each other. Okay. Now that I have, remember this is what I called our loom. Now that I have marked my loom with my ruler and my marker, I can put that away. I am not going to use it anymore for this project. It's going out of my way. So I'm going to move my loom up, and I'm going to now take my scissors, and I want to go ahead, and mark. With my scissor, I'm going to mark and cut on all these little lines. Now, when I cut cardboard, I like to use the inside of my scissors, not the tip of it. Sometimes the tip just doesn't cut it well enough, and especially if you have children's scissors, which are smaller, you want to get that cut all the way in here, okay? You don't want to use the tip. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do one little cut on my lines. Now, boys and girls, I'm not cutting very far. Do you see how I'm cutting? Not very far at all. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all the way along on my little marks. Now what this is going to be when we're finished is going to be a little catch to hold our yarn in. That's going to be the basis of our weaving. It's called our waft. And we're going to do something called warping the loom. Okay, so you see I'm cutting just a little bit of a cut. Great. So now I have that, it's all ready to go. Okay, so now that I have my loom all prepped here and here, I'm going to go ahead and get my yarn. Now, boys and girls, this is the tricky part. You have to follow along with me. I'm going to move on to my smaller loom for this, just so you can see it's not as complicated. I'm going to start up here in this corner, okay? Now, if you want to, you could get that marker off and you could make yourself a little note that says start. Or you could put an arrow, okay? Because you can use this over and over again. The first thing I'm going to do is see my yarn. This is my end. This is called a waft. And a waft is what we use to warp our loom. I'm going to take my waft and I'm going to stick it right through there. And you're going to notice that there's a little tiny bit. This is the back. Ooh, I'm going to write that on here too. Back. All right. This is my back. This piece of yarn is going to stick out right here, and I'm going to take a tiny little piece of tape. So you're going to probably, I forgot to tell you to get tape, so you're going to need to get a little piece of tape, and you're going to want to tape that down. Okay, just like that. Super simple. You want to make sure it's taped down really well because it's going to hold all that pulling you're going to do when you warp the loom. Okay, so this is my back. I'm going to flip it over to my front. This is where I'm starting, okay? I'm going to take that piece of yarn and I'm going to pull it all the way down to the first hole. I'm going to pull it through the first hole. Did you see how I did that? I pulled it through. So here is my front. Well, I'll even write it on there. This is my front. All right? And I've pulled my yarn from my starting point down. This is my back. Now watch what I'm going to do. It's going to go next door to the next little crack. Do you see that? It's going to go through that crack. I'm going to pull my yarn through the crack. See how I've done that? Okay, pull your yarn through the crack, and you're going to pull it back up straight across. So I like to say this. I have my yarn. It's going to go through my front door, around the corner, through the back door, across to my neighbors, through their front door, around through the back, through their back door, across the yard to my house, through my front door. Remember, this is my front. That's why I'm calling it my front door. Around, so it's going around through my back door, went through my back door, down across the yard to my neighbor's house, through their front yard, around behind, through their back door. Now this is really important, friends. And back to my house. I'm going to show you something. This is what I don't want you doing. You shouldn't be wrapping your yarn like this. If you're wrapping it like this with yarn across the back, you're not doing it correctly. And what will happen is when we cut our yarn off of our loom, it will fall apart. Okay? So it's really important that we don't wrap it, that we go through the front door, around to the back door, through the back door, across the yard, through their front yard door, around through their back door, across the yard through my front door, around the back to the back door, and across my yard to the front door again. And I have my loom warped. This is called warping the loom. Okay? If you're having troubles, rewind the video and watch it again. Sometimes even having a grown-up watch it with you will help you, because then they can say, oh, you need to try that part. Sometimes that makes it a little bit more helpful. Okay, now I have this extra yarn here. I'm not going to use it, so I'm going to pull it across, and I'm going to get another piece of tape out, and I'm going to tape it down and trim my yarn. And now I have some extra yarn that I could do weaving with if I wanted to. Okay? All right. So now that I have my yarn ready to go, my loom ready to go, I'm going to go ahead now and pick up one of my pieces of yarn to do my weaving. So I gave you some multicolored yarn for this one. So you're going to go ahead, and this is a tricky part, and I've noticed that a lot of my friends need a grown-up to help them do this, because sometimes we haven't learned to tie our shoes yet, and that's what we're going to do, is tie it. So I'm going to go ahead and start right where my starting point, I put the word start here, and I'm going to take my yarn, and I have a little tail on one end and a lot of tail on the other, and I want to go ahead and tie it. Do you see how I did this? Watch, I'm going to push this one across, and I'm going to tie it just like I were tying my tennis shoe. And I'm going to pull. Oops. Now I don't have to do the bow part, just the tying beginning part. And I'm going to pull it tight. Do you see that piece right there? We're going to leave it, and we can trim it later on. I'm going to actually pull it back to that side. Okay, it's tied on. If you need help having someone tie that on for you, ask for help for that. Okay, now the trick with weaving is that we go over, under. This one counts as being an over. So even though we have just, it's going to be an under. Even though we're just starting on this one, we always have to count these ones as over, under. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to take my yarn. I'm going to actually just wrap it up in a little ball. And I'm going to start with this being over. So my next one I'm going to go is under. I'm going to go under my green piece. So do you see how that went underneath that green piece? Then it means I'm going to go over this piece. And I'm going to go under. I'm going to go opposite every time. Over. Here's over. Under. Over. Under. I'm going to move my camera just a little closer for you. Okay. You see that a little bit better? So here I went over. This is under. See how the green's on top? That shows me that that's over. It's over that one. So my weaving piece, which is called my waft, is now going to go under, over, under. That one would be over. Good. And this one would be under. And I want to pull it tight every time. If I don't pull it tight every time, I will end up having this confusing piece of yarn that will not go where we want it to. And it will have a bubble in it, and then it sort of kind of gets confusing. All right, now here's the trick. So I went over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. This one would be over, right? So now that looks like it's over. So now I have to count this one twice. I say over, and now I say under. So did you see how I did that twice? I went over, across. Now I'm going, when I go back this way, it's going under. Under. If I went under, I go over. What you're going to notice, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. What you're going to notice is, I'm going to use my fingers to push it up, is that they're opposite. So look at this. Over, this one went over, this one's under. This one's under, this one's over. So every time I look at them, they should be opposite one another. If I have one over, the next one has to be under. If I have one under, the next one has to be over. And I'll go all the way across just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and do it I'm just going to keep doing it. So remember, here's that tricky part. I went under, I have to count this one twice. So I went under going this way. To turn around and go back this direction, I have to go over it. That means this one would be my under. So it's really important that last string, you have to count it going one way, and then you have to count it going the other direction to go back. It's almost like you have to treat it like it's two separate strings. Okay? All right. So see how I did that again? I went all the way. Let's check and make sure I did it correctly. So I have over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. I think I'm doing it right. I haven't skipped. Over, under, over, under, over, under. Now here's my over, under. This one's going to go over, but what's my next one going to do? It's going to go under. That's right. Good job, you guys. Okay, so now what will happen is once you understand how to do the over-unders and you keep weaving, you're just going to keep going back and forth, back and forth. You push it up with your fingers because you want it to be nice and tight. Don't pull it too tight. I will tell you that as you get better at this, you can go back and adjust your loom. So what you can do is, say your loom, you're really good at this, you want your loom to be a little bit tighter together. I'll show you what you can do. After you're really good at this, you can take, maybe you do one and you finish it. After you're finished with that, you can take your scissors and go cut in between all these lines. And it will double the number of lines you have going up for you to weave across, okay? You'll need a longer piece of yarn too. All right, now what happens when I've been following my pattern and all of a sudden I run out of yarn? Oh no, don't let it get too short. I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to now pick up another piece of yarn. And again, you might need someone to help you, but I'm going to show you how to do it yourself. You're going to take your yarn and you're going to put, I need to leave a tail on it, okay? I'm going to put the two tails next to each other just like this. They're friends. And I'm going to wrap it around my finger just like that and make a loop. And I'm going to take these two pieces and tuck them through the hole. Or maybe. Tuck them through the hole. I'm going to pull them through and I'll pull it tight. And now my two pieces of yarn are tied together and I can trim my tails off. And now I have a longer piece of yarn. My waft has grown. And so I'm going to just keep going. Now, if you have little knots that come up, don't worry about them. We know how to tuck them in later on. And we're just going to keep weaving. Okay? Okay, friends, so I sent you home with 4 strands of yarn, and that's going to be 4 strands of yarn. If you have more yarn at home, I'd love for you to go ahead and pull that yarn out and then go ahead and add it to it and just continue all the way down. If you don't, then you had a sampling of what it's like to do weaving. Now, I want to show you a few things. You see how you can still see my green through here? If I continue to push my yarn up like this, it'll get tighter and tighter and tighter. It does get smaller, but you'll be able to push it so you don't see that green. And as we have more yarn, this is what we would do in the classroom. We would just keep pushing it up and up and up so that we get it really tight, and then it will be nice and ready for us to cut off. So I'm going to show you how to finish your piece now. Once you get to the bottom and you're weaving all the way, or if you run out of yarn, you're going to go ahead and take this and you're going to tie it around your end. So I stopped here because if I keep going, I'm just going to get halfway. So I stopped here. I'm going to tuck it under because I went over. I'm going to tuck it under because I want it to wrap. And then I'm going to go ahead, make a loop, and just tie the end of my yarn on. Okay? So now I'm ready. I'm not going to trim anything yet, but now I'm ready to go ahead and take my weaving off of the loom so I can use my loom again. And in order to do that, the first thing, I'm going to start with my long end. I'm going to flip it over to the back. So I have these loops that I told you about. I'm going to trim off each of these loops. What I'm doing is I'm just cutting them. See how I'm separating those loops? I'm putting my scissors in and I'm separating those on the back. This one is already separated and I can go ahead and take my tape off of that one. All right? All right. I'm going to flip it back over, and I can go ahead and pull those out. When I pull them out, you'll see that you have a piece of yarn in between it. See how that looks? So if I take this and I tie it nice and tight, it's going to hold it. I'm going to tie it 2 times. 1, 2. All right? I'm going to take the next 2 out. I'm going to tie them together. 1, 2. That will keep it from unraveling. This is why it's really important we don't wrap our yarn all the way around the back of our loom, because it will come undone. We'll have 2 pieces that get confusing. Now this one has 3, and because I have 3 here, it's going to get confusing on what I tie it to. So I'm going to put these 2 together, my 2 ends together, and this one, and I'm just going to tie it like these are 1. 1, 2. Okay, now you have the choice to leave it like a little fringe on the end of it, or you can trim it. You can trim it really close if you want to, or you can keep it longer if you want to. Right, now I'm going to go do the top part. So I'm going to just pull my yarn down a little bit so my weaving is a little bit more squished towards the bottom. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to cut those pieces of yarn again. And I'm going to repeat the same thing I did on the other side. All right, so I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to pull my yarn pieces out. I know that that's my end piece, so remember what I told you about the end pieces, they have to go together. And this one is a little bit harder because it's so much shorter. So there's a couple ways you can have somebody help you do it, because even for me it's hard. So if you have a grown-up help you, it might be easier. Another way to do that is before you take it off the loom, you press it down so that these yarn pieces get to be just a tad bit longer. You just have a little bit more space to do your tying. This will not leave you with a fringe. If you wanted there to be more of a fringe, then before you cut it off, push your weaving into the middle of your piece, okay, on your loom, and then it will be ready for you to have a fringe on both ends. All right. So these pieces are just being tied together. Remember that yarn is right in the middle of them like I showed you before. It's trapping it in there so it can't unravel. That's why it's really important that we follow the over, under bit. Okay? All right, my 2nd grade friends, I hope that you're going to get to go ahead and do all of your weaving, and hopefully you'll have some extra yarn at home so you can have a piece that's bigger than mine. Because what you can end up doing is making a little, let me bring that up, making a little rug to put your drinks on. All right, so my bubbly water can sit on my little rug I made if I made it a little bit bigger. So if you have more yarn at home. A fun thing to do too with your loom is if you have more cardboard, you can make long, skinny ones. So you just cut your piece of cardboard maybe 9 or 10 inches long and maybe only 4 inches wide, and then you can make long, skinny, like a little rug. Could be for your American Girl doll. You can make a scarf. You can go ahead and make more square ones that you can put drinks on top of. You can do all sorts of weaving. It's really fun. Once you're finished, I hope that you will take a picture of it and you will send it to me so I can see what you've been working on. All right, friends, if you master this one and you feel really confident about it, go and watch the 3rd grade weaving. Maybe you'll want to try that one. All right, I miss you all, and I hope you have a really good time making this, and I look forward to seeing what you've created.